You've hosted 2 presidential debates.
I have.
Now, before the debate that you hosted in 2016 between Clinton and Trump, you said, it's not my job...
Clinton, yes,
sorry,
Clinton and Trump,
yeah.
right.
It's not my job to fact-check candidates.
Right.
That's the job of the opposing candidate.
Right.
That is the approach to much controversy that the CBS moderators took this time around. And I think people get angrier when you, now these days, than they used to when you say that you're not going to, aggressively fact-check Trump. Do you think that they did a good job? What did you make of their performance in the vice presidential debate?
When the moment when they had been talking about Springfield,
yes,
Ohio, and the question came up as to whether the Haitian immigrants who were they there legally or illegally, and Margaret Brennan, whom I have great regard for, tried to fact check Vance, and then Vance said, "No, you're wrong," and wanted to argue with her about it, and they cut off the mics. I winced. I thought that was just terrible. And I must say, I took some heat when I said I wasn't going to fact check in 2016. Got to remember, this was 2016 seems like it was 8 years ago. But in terms of our feeling about lies and just sort of shameless misrepresentations on the stage, this is before Trump had become president. Yes, he was running, but he hadn't become president. It feels like a much more innocent time than where we've gone in the last 8 years. I think my saying at that time, I'm not going to fact check, stands up pretty well because, you look at what happened with ABC, where they fact checked, you look what happened with CBS. It's a very slippery slope. I mean, I guess I really still feel like the obligation is on the other candidate. Right. And, the difference is that the other candidate in 2016 was Hillary Clinton. And, one had no doubts that she would be able to figure out for herself what she wanted to contest. In the Trump-Biden debate in June, the problem was Biden was incapable of fact-checking, and that creates a different issue. But this is probably going to be controversial, what I'm going to say, is that I think, you say, boy, this is great. We want controversial.
Yeah,
what are you going to give us? I think that the moderator's fact-checking sometimes feels to me like virtue signaling, that it's like I'm going to sort of puff myself up. What you're going to fact check, what you're not going to fact check, who you're going to fact check or not. I mean, there was one point in the ABC debate where Trump had said, "Well, I lost," and David Muir asked him about it, and Trump said, "I was being sarcastic," and Muir then said, "Well, it didn't seem to me you were sarcastic." Really? I mean, now we're going to fact check on whether a guy was being sarcastic or serious?
Tone.
Yes, tone exactly.
Yeah.
I just think, there was a point in the ABC debate when they were talking about babies being killed post-birth, and I forget whether it was Lindsay or David, somebody said, there's not a single state where that's legal. I didn't mind that. It's like Potter Stewart, a Supreme Court justice, said about obscenity. I don't know that I can define it, but I know it when I see it. There are times when I see a fact check and I think that's useful. And there are times when it feels like the moderator is just trying to say, well, I know better and I'm not going to go down that road or let you get away with that. But, when it ends up with you cutting off somebody's mic who's just trying to answer, you decided to fact check him and then he's going to sit there and argue with you and you're not going to let him do that. When I did my first debate, I sat down with Jim Lehrer, who was the king of presidential debates. He did 12 of them. There was one election cycle because at that point, the Commission on Presidential Debates didn't dictate, which it did in our case, who the moderators were going to be. It still had to be negotiated with the campaigns. And the only one that the two campaigns could agree on was Jim Lehrer. So he ended up moderating all 3 presidential debates. And Lehrer said to me, we had lunch before I did my first debate in 2016, and he said, you got to understand, it's not about you. It's not about the moderator. And if at the end of the debate people say, that's a great debate, was there even a moderator there? That's a success.
You did a good job.
It's like a prize fight. God, that was a great fight. Did they even have a referee in the ring with them? So, at any point where you become the story in a presidential debate or a vice presidential debate, I think you failed.
My last question. I take it then that you're unswayed by this argument that I think has become fashionable in media criticism lately, that Trump has changed the rules and that he needs to be approached in a different way, not just in debates, but in everything else. And that the media needs to figure out how to cover Trump, and it's not the traditional ways that they've always covered politicians.
No, I am somewhere in the middle. I feel strongly both ways as the beer commercial goes. I do think that Trump has to be covered differently than other politicians because he's done things no other politician has done. He's contested an election. I mean, this is one of the points I make in the book, Countdown 1960, particularly at the end when I'm comparing what happened in 1960 to what happened in 2020. So much of what he did in contesting the transition of power had never happened before in our country, and he's still leaving the door open to doing it again. And so I do think he has to be covered differently. I just think that you have to pick your spots, and you have to think, is this really something like in the ABC debate when they set the record straight on something that I didn't know? I mean, I suspected it, but it wasn't allowing a baby to die if they're viable post-abortion is not legal in any state in America. I think that was useful to the viewer. But I think there are times when, if Trump says, I won the election, I think fact-checking him at this point and saying, no, you didn't win the election, particularly in a debate, is virtue signal.